So, how much trouble is the president in this time? Is he guilty of treason? Let's talk to American political commentator Beth Gardner and Greg Swenson from Republicans Overseas. Hello to you both. The former CIA director John Brennan used that word treason yesterday. Beth, it's been used by others since. Is that right?
Well, that's certainly a very big question, and it's a pretty strong word. You know, I think that the most important dynamic, or one of the most important dynamics that we have seen so far in the Trump presidency, has been the reluctance of elected Republicans to stand up and confront the president. And I think that that is really sort of at the center of the question of what, punishment or what sort of consequences might there be for Trump for the, really quite shocking and bizarre statements that we heard when he was standing there next to Putin and saying that he really couldn't decide whether he believed American intelligence or, sort of one of our greatest global adversaries as on the question of whether there was meddling in the 2016 election. I think there have been some strong words, some sort of stronger than usual condemnation from Republicans in Washington in the hours since that press conference landed. But we've been here before. There have been moments. I think one that comes to mind is the Charlottesville neo-Nazi demonstrations last year when Trump sort of said both sides are to blame, and we heard sort of stronger than usual words from Republicans, but sort of similarly to, some of the sort of more routine kind of outrages that we've become used to, there was no follow-up and no action. So there were a few days of sort of, really upset language and statements being released, but no action. And you have to remember that Republicans currently control all the levers of power in Washington. The Democrats can't really do anything but sort of raise their voices. The Republicans control both houses of Congress. They could pass legislation to protect the special counsel, Robert Mueller, from being fired. They could require Trump to release his tax returns, given the suggestions of some kind of financial entanglement with Russia. But I think we've seen that elected Republicans really are very afraid to stand up to Trump. So they'll say very critical things of him in private. They will make some sort of more milquetoast type of statements publicly, but there's been no willingness to sort of stand up and actually use their power to take some action against him. So I think the question really is whether there's a red line.
Whether there's a red line. Yeah. Teflon Don is a phrase that is used, isn't it? Nothing sticks. Will it this time, Greg Swenson? I wonder what you felt as you watched that news conference yesterday and you heard President Trump asked to make a choice between his own intelligence agencies and the word of Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, listen, that was a lot of commentary from Beth. I think we can agree that it was not a great day for the president. So, look, I think it was a wasted opportunity. He had a chance. I thought it was a great idea that he reached out to Putin. Presidents have been doing this since Roosevelt. Roosevelt, with Stalin, and Kennedy with Khrushchev, and Reagan with Gorbachev. We've had a great history of managing through the Cold War and since. Now, look, it's clear that, U.S.-Russian relations are at the lowest since the Cold War. I think it was wise that the president wanted to reach out. The opportunity was there yesterday. He should have had Dan Coates' back, and he didn't, and I think that was a failure. So I agree on that. Now, as far as the criticism from the right, I think there was plenty of it today. And I think, for example, you saw Newt Gingrich come out immediately and suggest, he's a big Trump supporter, and suggest that the president dial it back and really rethink and maybe even restate his comments. I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah, we heard Arnold Schwarzenegger just before we talked to you describing it as embarrassing. He described him as a poodle, as a fanboy, someone who sold out. Newt Gingrich calling for him to correct the most serious mistake of his presidency. When you compare the President Trump that we saw standing up there in Helsinki yesterday to the very robust president that we saw with Theresa May, with NATO, talking about the EU. What happened there, Greg Swenson? What was going on?
Yeah, it's hard to figure out. I mean, the one thing with President Trump is you always, expect the unexpected. Now, last week he did his usual routine of, throwing a grenade in the room, making some comments that might be a little off color, dialing back the next day, and it worked. Look, he exposed this the German Nord Stream 2 pipeline. I don't think a lot of people outside of the pundit world knew of Nord Stream 2, and he really made brought that to the attention of the world. I think he made a lot of progress that 4 presidents have failed to do, starting with Jimmy Carter on getting 2% of GDP commitments from NATO. So the system worked last week, the Trump, throw the grenade in the room system. It didn't work yesterday. I think it was a complete disaster. I don't know what happened between then and now. I mean, there might have been a little bit of some thought process that look, I could call him out, which is what a lot of us on the right wanted him to do, call him out on his human rights issues, call him out on his aggression, but also, keep in mind that it's best to dial back conflict, and I think that's what he did, and he might have, I think he overdid it. I agree with Arnold Schwarzenegger on a few of those things, that it might have been his worst moment as president. I hope he dials back from it, but I think we should also keep some perspective here. The press, especially the left-leaning press, really despises the president, anything he does. He could have saved some puppies from a flood yesterday, and they're going to criticize him. So look, it was a mistake. I wish he'd had Dan Coates' back, but I think there's room to fix this.
Do you think there is room to fix this, Beth Gardner, given the reaction to President Trump, the questions over why he was the way he was yesterday in Helsinki? Some even asking the question, well, what does Russia have on him?
Yeah, I mean, that is the question that people keep asking. And I think the reason that you hear some of this, speculation and ideas that sort of sound outlandish, around sort of idea of does Russia have some kind of compromising information on him, is because the behavior is so outlandish. As you said, this is a president who's willing to, make the most personal and really bitter attacks on American allies, whether it's Trudeau in Canada or Angela Merkel or indeed Theresa May. And yet the one person who he really, and it's not just yesterday, it's been the pattern, really since the beginning of his campaign a couple of years ago, is that he refuses to really ever say anything about Putin, whether it's regarding this issue of interference in the American election, whether it's about the nerve agent attacks here in the UK, the annexation of Crimea. And it's just very, been very puzzling. I think the most innocent explanation is still really quite damning, and that is that Trump's sort of, a pattern of making everything about himself is at play here. So he can't hear questions about election interference without making it about the accusation of whether his campaign was complicit in that. In fact, that's a separate question, those are accusations that have not yet been proven. The special counsel is investigating them, but it is widely accepted by the intelligence community and across the political spectrum in the States that Russia did interfere. Trump cannot bring himself to sort of put the national security of the country over his own political concerns about himself. And how it may play for him, or whether it sort of undermines the legitimacy of his election, which seems to be the sort of insecurity that underpins a lot of this behavior from him. So as I said, that's the innocent explanation. It's pretty damning as far as his ability to, perform the duties of a president and to put the interests of the country ahead of his own interests. Okay. And the more damning explanations are, this notion that Russia has something on him, whether it's financial dealings or otherwise.
Okay. Beth Gardner, Greg Swenson, great talking to you both. Thank you.
Thank you.